Libéria, abril de 2003. Libéria, outubro de 2011. O que separa essas duas realidades são muito mais do que 7 anos.
Are you sick and tired of war? Come join.
A virada teve a participação decisiva de um grupo de mulheres lideradas por Leymah Gbowee, que dividiu o Prêmio Nobel da Paz de 2011 com a atual presidente liberiana, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, e a ativista iemenita Tawakkul Karman. Leymah é uma assistente social que motivou mulheres cristãs e muçulmanas das 30 etnias que convivem na Libéria a forçar os senhores da guerra a negociarem a paz. Um protesto simples. Vestidas de branco, elas se sentaram dia após dia no caminho do Palácio Presidencial com uma única mensagem: chega de guerra. Usaram todos os recursos que tinham, até greve de sexo elas fizeram, para forçar os homens a depor as armas. O país, fundado em 1847 por ex-escravos americanos, nasceu de um sonho de liberdade. Os novos homens livres queriam buscar suas origens e foram estimulados por alguns americanos brancos que não acreditavam que os negros tinham a capacidade de ser bem-sucedidos nos Estados Unidos e, por isso, deveriam voltar para o continente africano. Mas depois de uma série de golpes e contragolpes, chegou ao fim da década de 80, mergulhado numa guerra civil sanguinária que durou 14 anos. Por trás dos combates estava a disputa pelo controle da exploração dos chamados diamantes de sangue, que também levaram a guerras igualmente sangrentas os vizinhos Burkina Faso e Serra Leoa. Num breve período de trégua, um dos senhores da guerra foi eleito presidente, Charles Taylor. Mas os combates logo foram retomados e Taylor foi indiciado por crimes de guerra e contra a humanidade pelo Tribunal Penal Internacional de Haia, na Holanda. Exércitos descalços de meninos soldados armados com Kalashnikovs mataram, saquearam e fizeram de mulheres e crianças armas de uma guerra cruel. O estupro foi sistematicamente usado para subjugar aldeias e aterrorizar vilarejos.
She saw the huge 3 guys. One stripped himself to rape her daughter in her presence.
Como os típicos conflitos do pós-Guerra Fria, foram elas as maiores vítimas desses combates, até que disseram basta. O encontro com Leymah Gbowee foi aqui em Nova York, num evento que promovia o documentário que contou ao mundo a história de coragem das mulheres da Libéria. O título, Reze para o Diabo Voltar para o Inferno, é uma referência à fé religiosa do ex-presidente Charles Taylor. Dizia-se que a crença dele era tão poderosa que ele conseguia rezar até o diabo sair do inferno. A força das mulheres guiadas por Leymah conseguiu anular esse poder e mandar o diabo da guerra de volta para o lugar de onde ele nunca deveria ter saído. Quando você começou os protestos, você tinha ideia de que você ia conseguir mudar a história da Libéria?
No, never. When we first started until today, in my mind, everything I do, everything we've done as women has been survival for our own survival, the survival of our children, the survival of our community. So that's when we started, that was it. We had seen the worst for 14 years and we needed to reverse that trend.
Como é que você conseguiu manter a esperança mesmo durante os 14 anos da guerra?
It's difficult to live in a hopeless situation and don't wake up in the morning and see something to be hopeful for. During the times of the war, it's difficult to look around and really see flowers, you know, or see the sunlight as something hopeful. But you can say to yourself, you know, this is something that is going to end. Because that was one thing that I always kept in the back of my head. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And then when you're doing the kind of work that you're doing, and constantly people are saying to you, you are a source of hope for me. You need to be hopeful in order to inspire hope.
That's a lot of responsibility.
That is a lot of responsibility. And so for many months there were times that I would cry my tears of frustration, tears of anger in the privacy of my bedroom, wipe my face, step out in the morning and put a hopeful smile on my face that this too is going to pass. But I cannot say that it was just me, because there were other women, older women, who inspire hope in me. You know, when things got rough, they would sit me down and say to me, you know, you have to keep your focus, because this is huge, you need to do this, you need to do that. So while there were a whole group looking at me as a symbol of hope, I was looking back at a whole group of people as also my symbol of hope.
Como é que vocês se deram conta de que começar pelas igrejas e pelas mesquitas era o melhor caminho?
Well, the church, I tell people that I had this dream, woke up this morning with rain coming into my room, feeling really cold, but the voice had said, gather the women of the church to pray for peace. I had a pastor who was my boss. I went to him and said, I had this dream, so you need to call the women of the church together. And he said, no, it is your dream. The bearer of the dream is the carrier of the dream. So you have to do that. And I was like, God had to be making a mistake, not me, because my life is not a reflection of a quote-unquote very Christian or religious person. He was like, God can use the foolish things of this world to confront the wise. So you would have to do this. We put a tiny group together called the Christian Women to Pray for Peace. Every Tuesday at 12 noon, we'll go into a tiny room to pray. And then after several months of doing this, the Muslim women were inspired and they started. So they said, can you come and help us? So we went to meetings. We found out that every Friday after prayers, they would just stand around talking. So it became clear that let's take this time that you just stand around talking and find a space where we can all sit and just talk about issues of building peace. So that's how they started, from standing around talking into identifying a room close to the mosque where they too would sit, talk about issues of peace and pray for peace. That's how the Christian women started, and then both groups decided we'll work together if we find anything affecting our community. The war was imminent. They decided they wanted to work together, and then they said to me, you are our leader. And I was like, no, I can help you all to write papers to do this, but you should find a leader from amongst yourselves. And they were like, no, you are the leader that we have chosen. So kind of like from a divine thing to an earthly confirmation that this is something that God was actually saying he wanted done.
Em junho de 2003, o apoio aos protestos tinha crescido tanto que o governo não podia mais ignorar as mulheres que enfrentavam o calor escaldante e a chuva para pôr fim à guerra. Depois de 3 meses, o então presidente Charles Taylor aceitou receber as manifestantes. Elas prepararam um documento em que exigiam negociações imediatas de paz entre o governo e os rebeldes. O encontro foi no Palácio Presidencial da capital Monróvia e Leymah foi escolhida para ler o apelo escrito pelo grupo.
We ask the Honorable Pro Tem of the Senate, being a woman and being in line with our cause, to kindly present this statement to His Excellency Dr. Charles Taylor with this message that the women of Liberia, including the IDPs, we are tired of war. We are tired running. We are tired begging for burger wheat. We are tired of our children being raped. We are now taking this stand to secure the future of our children because we believe as custodians of society tomorrow, our children will ask us, Mama, what was your role during the crisis? Kindly convey this to the President of Liberia. Thank you.
Quando vocês finalmente conseguiram entrar e falar com o Charles Taylor no Palácio Presidencial, de onde você tirou força para ler aquele comunicado, aquele pedido de vocês?
That morning, the night before was really a night of I was worried first that the women may not turn out because they would be afraid. That was my biggest worry. But when morning came, my confidence rose when I got to where we had planned to converge and saw over 1,000 women already gathered by 7 a.m. Then we went to meet with Taylor, and I was already angry because some of the women who came, really, every day you see people going through hunger and abuse in different forms. So I was already, my emotions were being worked up. And then we get to the palace and they said, oh, he said he will not see all of you. He will only see a few of you in his office. By that time, I had lost it. And I said, I'm going upstairs to give him a piece of my mind. I was really, really angry. And then by the time we were going upstairs to his office, the bodyguards came running down to say, no. He says he's coming down to meet you all. Hurriedly, they prepared a place and brought chairs for us to sit. And we said, no, we will not sit on chairs. We'll sit on the floor. Because the women down there were sitting on the floor. We sat on the floor. And then when it was time to read the statement, I felt like the statement was too decent for someone who wasn't decent. It was too sterile. It was too polite. So after I read the statement, in presenting the statement, I had to add what I thought was a watered down impression of how I was feeling at that moment. Because at that moment, I felt like if we miss this opportunity of speaking the truth to this man, we may never get this opportunity again. And the opportunity was to say to him, we're really tired being raped. We're tired begging for food. We're tired moving from one place to the other. And we think we want to leave a legacy that we stood up for peace. You know, in essence, just looking him straight in the eye and saying to him, Mr. President, we're fed up with your war. And you need to change this whole situation around and give us the peace that we need.
And how did he react?
He had on these very dark glasses that he never took out. And when he stood up to respond, he said he had the flu and he had been sick for several days, but it was only the love of his mother that would get him out of bed, and we represented the mothers of Liberia, and that he was committing to go to the peace talks. But then he also challenged us that in order for him to see our movement as not biased, we needed to reach out to the rebels, and we did that.
Você nunca teve medo durante todo esse período de protestos?
I never had a moment of fear. Again, I was 17 when the war started. When we were protesting, I was 31. I think I had taken enough dose of fear, and by that time I was immune to fear. I wasn't afraid at all, because again, if you live in a situation where death is all around you, what are you afraid of? Because first, no tomorrow was certain for any Liberian. No one you can wake up today and say, okay, I am certain that I will have it tomorrow because I'm living in a peaceful country. But you're living in a place where guns are staring you straight in the face every day. Someone could accidentally pull the trigger, you could die. So nobody knew what the next second would be for them. So there's no fear anymore.
Em agosto, as negociações de paz finalmente começaram. O encontro foi em Accra, capital de Gana, território neutro.
The people of Liberia have suffered for too much and for too long.
Mas 6 semanas de diálogo não levaram ao tão esperado acordo. O grupo de Mulheres pela Paz não arredou o pé da porta do hotel que sediava o encontro e decidiu não sair de lá enquanto os homens não alcançassem uma trégua. No momento de desespero, Neymar chegou a dizer a um líder rebelde conhecido pela crueldade: se você fosse um homem, não mataria o seu próprio povo.
No way that if even we have this thing that we say, if you scare a child with a particular object for so long, a point of time will come and that child will say, I'm not afraid. My son, my third child, used to like to ride a particular truck, and every time he would see this truck, he would ask the driver to get on, and the driver would taunt him, and then he would cry. So it went on, and one day the driver came and said to him, you are not riding my truck. And this little boy turned to this man and said, I don't even want to ride your truck. So that is the feeling. If you taunt a group of people, if you frighten them, if you just continue to hammer fear in them, they will come to that point where they will snap, and it's either turn around to you and say something that will make you shock. And that was what we did. We were really fed up. There was no fear again. A lot of the women had seen the worst. If you've lived to see your child die from hunger, if you live to see your son shot on a line in front of you, if you live to see your husband killed, where is the fear? The only thing you're looking at is survival for you and your children.
Mesmo depois do fim do governo do Charles Taylor, vocês continuaram na luta até garantir que ia haver eleições democráticas. Essa luta por democracia continua? Ainda tem coisa a ser feita na Libéria?
There are still challenges in the areas of reconciliation. We still have a lot of strides to make when it comes to women economic empowerment. But if we looking back and reflecting on the work that we did after the signing of the peace agreement, I think the kind of vibrance in the women's movement that we see in Liberia, the boldness, the authority that is taken by women, whether at the community level or at the ministerial level, is something that I think was inspired by all of those women who worked. Because now also you see women who have never been to school signing up for adult literacy classes because they're like, you know, I want to be able to sign my name when I go to the bank. I don't want to use my thumbprint anymore. So you have different things and different issues that women are involved with.
O fato de você ter ganhado o Prêmio Nobel da Paz pode ajudar a melhorar o que ainda precisa ser melhorado na Libéria?
Well, I think the prize has really shown the light on not just the Liberian women's struggle, but the struggle of women globally. There is no way you can talk about a Nobel for a Lima, that's a woman in Brazil who's doing something similar to what we did, would not feel like this is our prize. You know, because it is a recognition of the grassroots effort. If there is a teacher somewhere who's just bringing little kids together to teach them to read, the prize is your prize, because you are doing something that is not just showing light or is gaining any media attention, but is targeted at changing a community. Something we did, something we continue to do. So it has really shown the light now. More and more media outlets will be looking for everyday women like myself who are making changes in their communities to put the spotlight on. That's what the prize has done. Secondly, I think it's also really has opened up a whole new avenue of opportunities for women to really just to say to women, you know what? We should invest in your work. We should invest in your activity, because we just don't know where this might lead to.
Mas você diz também que não quer que o prêmio te mude, né? Que você não passe a ser considerada uma escolhida, uma premiada por causa disso.
No, I don't want anyone to call me Laureate Lima. My name is Lima, and I tell people the same L that spelled the laureate is the same L that spelled Lima. So just keep it at Lima, and that's what I am. Because all of these names and titles tend to get to people's head. I'm a laureate, is rating in the history of the world. Nothing will ever change that, but I don't have to carry Laureate Lima to be identified. No, I'm a local girl. My name is Lima, and that's how I want to keep it.
Você também disse que não queria que o prêmio te distanciasse das pessoas pelas quais você luta.
It's me. I have the decision to whether I will disconnect from the people or I will keep myself, with the people. And I don't see any way the naming or the branding, but I just don't want to be branded as a laureate. I want to be Lema, and as Lema is what I am. I don't want to be branded anything else. No, I don't want to be branded a laureate.
Tell me a little bit, one of the stories of the women of Liberia that strikes you the most.
Well, when I won the prize, I went back home on the weekend, and there was hundreds of women at the airport to meet me. They were spreading their cloths, and we were dancing and singing, and then we prayed. The Muslim women prayed, the Christian women prayed. But there was a particular song that they sang in my ethnic language that kind of like summarized our entire struggle. Because the struggle that we did, there were days that we didn't have money for transportation, we walked. There were days that we didn't have money for water, we didn't barter. There were days we didn't have money for food. When we went to the peace talks to protest, we ran out of money and we were almost like 10 to a hotel room. And the song they sang was, even if you beat me, or even if you're violent towards me because of peace, I'm satisfied. And I mean, it was like just reflecting on all of the pains that we had gone through. And I looked at those women and I said to them, truly, we are satisfied because the struggle had paid off. The recognition of the role of women, not just in Liberia but globally, their struggle, the women in Zimbabwe, the women in Liberia, the women in Sierra Leone, the women in Cote d'Ivoire, all over the world, even the women in Brazil, your struggle has paid off. You need to be satisfied. What we do now with our satisfaction is to translate that into economic empowerment for women, into education for our girls, into political leadership for our women. So in our satisfaction, let's not celebrate too long. Let's work harder to change this to a better life for women globally.